Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Craig Dodson. What you are about to see is my final presentation for exit from the Education Specialist degree for district licensure, um, the Department of Education Leadership at Henderson State University for the fall of 2024. Thank you so very much for the privilege of getting to present this for you today, and I look very much forward to its completion. Thank you very much. For standard 1.1, which is to collaboratively design, communicate, and evaluate a district mission and vision, I chose the assignment in which I attended 3 school board meetings to look for representation of that mission and vision. Derricks is not a district that places a great deal of emphasis on mission and vision. In fact, there are no district level mission and vision statements. At the school level, however, the mission is on the front page of the student handbook. The vision is not really written anywhere except for on the school improvement plan. The school's vision is together we will achieve growth for all. The school's mission is teachers, students, and other stakeholders at Joanne Walters Elementary work together to provide a foundation for all children to grow into caring, productive citizens who are successful in an ever-changing world. All 3 school board meetings represented primarily the vision, together we will achieve growth for all. In each one of the meetings, they were focused on personnel, they were focused on, there was one focused on an ACT Prep Mini Boot Camp, there was another that was more focused on salaries and salary schedules, and the third one was a longer meeting that focused on all of the hiring that had to be done for that year, and all of the discussions centered around student growth. So the mission and the vision were both represented thoroughly in all 3 of these meetings. This assignment was beneficial to me in 2 ways. I was brand new to the district, and so it did help me see that the district needed some mission and vision work. But it did also show me that the board's actions and decisions were in keeping with the vision that did exist in working towards steady and continuous growth. For standard 1.2, which has to do with planning and continuous improvement processes that engage diverse stakeholders in data collection, diagnosis, design, implementation, evaluation, I chose a resource analysis project. For this project, my school, as I did the analysis of the first year, over the first year of curriculum in general, my school was generally unhappy with their curriculum. So as part of that process, I engaged with the teachers in an overall curriculum evaluation over the entire course of the year with the association of the Bailey Group to analyze recommendations for curriculum change. For this assignment, which happened during that process, I chose to evaluate a Great Minds curriculum called Wit and Wisdom. The Wit and Wisdom curriculum was a major change from the Amplify CKLA curriculum that we were currently using. It was very well received by the teachers. There were a few teachers that liked the old curriculum better, but by and large, there were multiple things about this curriculum that teachers enjoyed. The teachers evaluated this using forms from Ed reports. We had a meeting. There was a unanimous decision to move to this curriculum, but the board felt that they were still under contract with the old one and denied permission to switch. But for the purpose of mastering this standard, we engaged the entire staff from superintendent and board down to paraprofessional in the process of planning for this curriculum change or seeing the pros and cons of each one of the curricula and really dissected both resources to decide what was best for our school. For standard 2.1, professional norms, which requires the capacity to reflect on, communicate about, and cultivate professional dispositions and norms. I chose an assignment that was done at Southern Arkansas University for organizational development, evaluation, and theory. Was a three-part assignment that was a super in-depth personal narrative. There was originally an analysis kind of spreadsheet chart that we did, followed by a four-page long capstone moment of your career. And it culminated in a 21-page paper that I titled Epilogue, Artistry, Choice, and Leadership. And it was a complete analysis of where I've come, how I shaped the way I feel, what my path to leadership had been, and how I feel going forward as a leader. It was by far the most introspective and reflective activity I have done as a student. It was an academic paper. It was quite thorough and required considerable reflection and evaluation of myself as a person, as a teacher, and as an instructional and building level leader. It was a fantastic example of professional norms and reflection. Standard 2.3, which requires the ability to demonstrate the capacity to model ethical behavior in personal conduct and relationships and to cultivate ethical behavior in others. I chose to use an assignment where we had to write a letter of reprimand. This is one of the most challenging things for me as a building level leader. Confronting adults rarely goes well. Most adults have an inherent desire to fight back. They are very difficult situations, and if you word something even slightly wrong, it creates a much bigger problem than the one you were trying to address. And this assignment in particular, as far as cultivating ethical behavior in others and enforcing the standard, was super beneficial to me in the amount of wordsmithing and word parsing that was necessary to make this letter and letters that I may write in the future more effective. Standard 3.2 has to do with the capacity to evaluate, cultivate, and advocate for equitable access to safe and nurturing schools, and supporting the success and well-being of each student. I chose one of two of the major assignments for the finance class, strategic school finance, that I took from Dr. Guevara at Southern Arkansas University. This was a lengthy paper. It was a final research paper on a major issue that schools are confronting and how that has affected that school or that district. I chose, at the time while I was working at Texarkana, Arkansas School District, I chose to do my paper on the consequences of the school choice initiative in the state of Arkansas. Nowhere is that as prevalent as you see it in Texarkana, Arkansas, which was once a reasonably high-performing school district and is now a D-level school district. They made it to C while I was there, which was a pretty big deal. The main reason that Texarkana has gone, quote, downhill is because of a concept known as white flight. When school choice became an initiative in Arkansas, any parent who could afford to, all the white parents, sent their children to nearby school districts like Genoa Central. Genoa Central is less than 20 miles away and literally doubled in size after school choice. Genoa Central has an extremely low minority population, is almost exclusively white, while Texarkana, Arkansas is now very low population of white students. That's had some profound consequences when 80% of your high academic performers leave. Not saying that African Americans aren't high academic performers by any means, but a large chunk of who were the high academic performers departed the school district. There was a rise in difficult behaviors, and there was a decline in test scores. They are still struggling with this today, And this has been an extremely difficult obstacle to overcome. And as I did the research for this paper, I began to discover that in many places in Arkansas, school choice is just a veiled word for segregated schools. Because once those choices are given, parents make choices and schools become increasingly one color or the other, which I think is unfortunate for the students and for the state. For standard 3.3, which has to do with the capacity to evaluate, advocate, and cultivate equitable, inclusive, and culturally responsive instruction and behavior support, I chose a PowerPoint that I did entitled Special Education Past, Present, and Future. As a career special educator that has worked in 2 states, I have quite a bit of experience in this area. Coming from a state where inclusion has been practiced for a while now, probably 10 or 15 years, and being a part of Arkansas's push for inclusion, a lot of the topic of this PowerPoint was kind of the poor state level rollout for inclusion. There's an expectation without providing the resources to make it work. There aren't enough special ed teachers in the schools to make it happen or make it effective. There isn't enough expertise at the administrative level to even oversee how it is supposed to happen. So in some ways, I feel like the state put the cart before the horse and put a label on something they weren't capable of doing. This is a problem as a principal. It's a problem at the district level in just about every district I've been associated with, even through conversation. This is a major issue that Arkansas is still dealing with, and any district or building level leader going forward for the next decade is going to have to work his or her way through and continue to develop the way special education is performed in the state of Arkansas. For standard 4.1, curriculum evaluation and design, which has to do with the capacity to evaluate, design, and implement high quality curricula, the use of technology and other services and supports, I chose a PowerPoint that I did on software evaluations, and the two that I compared were iReady versus Renaissance Learning. This was a very real issue that I was dealing with at the school level. Renaissance Learning is how our library was organized. The Renaissance book tests are readily and still in use at the school level, but the testing is very redundant with the iReady testing that we were already doing. And so it's a very tough decision for a program that is kind of rooted in the system versus one that probably does more of what we need. The iReady program offers the same type of progress monitoring, but able to do it more frequently. It offers by standard curriculum intervention materials as well as exercises, computer tracking, progress monitoring, the ability for students to invest in their own progress, the ability to give standards mastery tests periodically to see mastery of specific standards. There were a lot of things that iReady provided us that Renaissance just simply did not as a 3-time-a-year test. But at the same time, Renaissance gave us things that the other didn't. Ultimately, as a staff, and we decided to only do the book tests with Renaissance and not do Renaissance as a testing material. We were already giving multiple screening types of tests, and it would have just been another redundant test. And so we eventually went with iReady as a better choice for what our school needed. But this analysis was part of the greater analysis that was done by me and then at a staff level to decide what was best for the school. So not only was this educational for me, but it was directly beneficial to what I was doing at the time in my job. For standard 4.2, which is the capacity to collaboratively evaluate, design, and cultivate coherent systems of support, coaching, and professional development for educators, I chose a major paper that I wrote for Doctoral Research Foundations at SAU. It was one of the 2 major papers for that class. It was a 23-page paper that I did on the effect of positive behavior intervention and support on student performance at one elementary school. For the second part of that class, we did a perspective dissertation topic analysis, and mine was going in that direction. So I started with this paper. It had to do with the fact that at the outset of my program at SAU, I was the instructional facilitator for North Heights Community Elementary School in Texarkana. That school was brand new. It had been a junior high school and it was converted into an elementary school. In year one, I was the instructional facilitator. There was a principal and no assistant, so she and I were the only two administrators. And it outlined the process of systems establishment, professional development, how we were going to present things and teach the students, how students were going to have access to PBIS materials, how the counselor was going to present it within classrooms, the whole school level behavior support program. It's a very comprehensive implementation of PBIS at a school level, and this paper analyzed each step in the process and how we did that to implement the program at a very successful level in our first year. It was a super informative process, and the paper served as a great reflection for how to go through that process and see it through effectively. Standard 4.4 addresses the capacity to design, implement, and evaluate district-wide use of coherent systems of curriculum, instruction, assessment, student services, technology, and instructional resources. Just as I used before an analysis of our reading curriculum evaluation, this was a PowerPoint that I did evaluating K-6 math curriculum. This is very interesting because as I said that we voted to change the reading curriculum, it was disapproved by the board. At the time I turned this project in, we were leaning towards a curriculum change in math as well. But as the year wore on, we were informed more and more about the upcoming Atlas test being implemented by the state. And one of the things that we immediately noticed when the Atlas test came out was that it was almost word for word with the processes used in our current curriculum, which was illustrative mathematics. At a very last minute meeting at the end of the year, the teachers unanimously voted to keep illustrative mathematics for the simple reason that while the other curriculum looked more attractive, illustrative mathematics is what the kids needed to have consistent language in their testing. So didn't end up using this PowerPoint for curriculum adoption, but it was an encapsulation of the process that we went through and the analysis that we went through comparing the iReady curriculum with illustrative mathematics. And as stated, the iReady curriculum compared very favorably. But because of the means that the state was going to use going forward for testing, we chose to stay with illustrative mathematics. Standard 5.2 has to do with the capacity to understand, engage, and effectively collaborate and communicate with, through oral, written, and digital means, diverse families, community members, partners, and/or other constituencies. To prove mastery of this standard, I chose a PowerPoint that I had done at Southern Arkansas University called Hard Lessons, the George McKenna Story. This was based on an assignment where we were given movies and we had to watch a movie that was educational in nature, had to do with school leadership, and analyze the choices made and the means and methods used by that leader to be successful. The movie I was assigned was called Hard Lessons, the George McKenna Story. George McKenna was a school principal in rural Los Angeles that was sent to a failed school that was in pretty dire conditions. The entire basis of the movie was how he single-handedly reached out into the community to gain support for the kids and for the school. Local residents had low opinion of the teenagers in the neighborhood. There was a lot of gangs. One of the most remarkable scenes was a fence across from the school that was covered in graffiti, and he went over and painted the fence by himself. And they graffitied it again, so he painted it again. They graffitied it again, so he painted it again. And before long, there were other community members coming out to help him paint. And eventually, the graffiti stopped when the entire community became invested in his efforts to keep the fence clean. And that was symbolic of his efforts throughout the movie to lift up the community by reaching out into it, and getting the community involved in investing back into the kids instead of just talking about how awful they were, and the community as a whole through his efforts pulling together to make the school a success. Um, this was a very interesting assignment and an interesting analysis of the different techniques and conversations and his choices that he made throughout the leadership process. Standard 5.3 has to do with communication through oral, written, and digital means within a larger organizational, community, and political context to cultivate relationships with members of the business, civic, and policy community. I chose an assignment in which we were required to write 5 letters to different leaders: the governor, the secretary of education, our House representative, senator, so several, and the county judge, I believe, was the last one. I chose a different issue for each one that was pertinent to things that I was actually dealing with. This was a great assignment in that it taught more than business communication, more political communication, making sure that the letter has a positive overall tone and does not just look like a complaint letter, yet advocates for a need for the school or district. As a district level leader, it is important to keep a positive affect in all of your communications with political figures in order to engage them effectively, and create a meaningful relationship with them so that when you do have needs, those conversation doors are open. This was a very effective assignment in familiarizing us not only with how to find these people, but how to reach out to them and the effective ways of directly communicating with them. Standard 6.1 has to do with the capacity to develop, communicate, implement, and evaluate data-informed and equitable management, communication, technology, governance, and operation systems at the district level. For this standard, I chose a paper that I wrote while at Southern Arkansas called The Roles of the Superintendent. This paper focused on the 5 primary responsibilities of the superintendent, which for the purposes of the paper were pretty general, but the paper's assignment was to focus on the systems involved to be effective at each one. The 5 were school board liaison, district leader, manager of finance, manager of daily operations, and be the lobbyist for the district. And so each one of those sections, I evaluated the systems and the personnel necessary to be effective at each one. This was a great overview, and it was the result of having evaluated several research articles on how to be an effective superintendent and the roles of the superintendent to settle to those 5 general categories and how you use people and systems to be effective at each one. Standard 6.2 has to do with the capacity to develop, communicate, implement, and evaluate a database district resourcing plan and to support schools in developing their school level resourcing plans. This was a final project for my curriculum course titled Establishing a Guaranteed and Viable Curriculum for the Derrick School District. When I got hired as principal, there was no coherent curriculum in the building. While we had adopted illustrative mathematics and Amplify CKLA for math and reading, there was no purchased social studies or science curriculum whatsoever in the building. And the 2 that existed They didn't have all the pieces and parts for it, had never had any formal training on how to use it, and for most it was just in a box on a shelf. And there were a lot of teachers using teacher pay teachers. Pretty much every teacher in the building was kind of making up their own thing. One or two of them were trying very hard to stay faithful to the HQIM, but there were only one or two of them. My mission in my first year was one of evaluation. My mission in my second year was to be the driver for change in a school that really wasn't ready and willing to accept that change all the time. And as it went forward, I found the difficulty in being a driver for change without all the support that you need to make that change happen. It became a very difficult process, but one that has been moving forward. This presentation was kind of the capstone of the evaluation phase of the process, and is still in the hip pocket for use later. It was the compare contrast of the final curriculum resources that we were considering, and was already used for the Ready for Learning, the HQIM team for the school and the district to see the differences in the decisions that were made at the school level. Standard 6.3 has to do with the capacity to develop, implement, and evaluate coordinate data-informed systems for hiring, retaining, supervising, and developing school and district staff in order to support the district's collective instructional and leadership capacity. This is human resource based, but I chose a project that I did for strategic school finance. I said earlier that there were two big projects for that class. This is the second one, and it was our budgeting proposal. We were to analyze the 21-22 budget for our school district, which at the time I was at Texarkana, and with this microanalysis, make recommendations of spending for the coming year, whether we increase or decrease, and then recommend any major changes to the budget or budget structure for the coming year. After a lengthy analysis, the culmination of my changes, or the bulk of my changes, existed in the personnel realm. As we know, personnel is by far the largest budget expenditure that we undertake as a school district, and so the recommended changes were not small ones financially. I recommended the addition at the school level to several new positions, positions of registrars and positions of curriculum directors and building level 504 coordinators. At Arkansas Middle School, we had over 200 504s, and in all of the responsibility for counseling, for being a registrar, and for 504 coordination fell on our counselors. Our counselors were overwhelmed, so none of the jobs were being done fully effectively. In addition, we were having a great deal of trouble helping teachers be effective with their curriculum and with their academics, and being effective coaches as administrators, because we were spending so much time dealing with discipline that getting into the classrooms was difficult. And so I recommended the adoption of building level curriculum coordinators rather than just the ones at the district level who came to visit you 4 or 5 times a year. At the time of the analysis, there was a budget carryover by the district of $6,722,737. I recommended using a piece of that carryover to fund the $482,037 to fund all of those new positions going forward. This was a really great analysis of not only budget and money, but using those resources to make the best improvements to your school possible within the boundaries and boxes that are put in front of you to make that happen. So I felt like this was a really effective assignment for me in how to make effective use of personnel and how to create a personnel system that works for the school and the district in more effective ways. Standard 7.2 has to do with the capacity to design, implement, cultivate, and evaluate effective and collaborative systems for district governance. I chose to show mastery here with a paper titled Entry Plan Assignment. This assignment was, you are taking over, what is it that you're going to do to get started? At the time of this assignment, I was making the change from Texarkana to Derrick School District, going from assistant principal in one to principal in another. And so it was a very appropriate assignment because it really put in my mind the things that needed to be done both at a building and a district level, and actually served as kind of a roadmap for how to walk in the door. I will be looking at this assignment again in the future for future endeavors, especially for superintendency. This was a very productive assignment. I basically made a checklist under 6 different categories. Those categories were student achievement, community relations, staff morale, safety and security, facilities, and finance. And I made about a 5 or 6 item checklist in paragraph form of different things that needed to be done within the first few weeks or months of walking in a door and starting a new job and kind of kicking things off the right way. So this was a great assignment to help build those systems and to think about the process of district governance and building what it takes to be successful. For Standard 7.3, which has to do with the capacity to evaluate, engage in decision making around, implement, and appropriately communicate about district, state, national policy, laws, rules, and regulations, I chose a paper that I wrote concerning policy review and change. We had to review a current policy, make changes to it, rewrite it, and represent that policy. That assignment was something that I was familiar with, having helped found a school in Virginia. I wrote a 600-page policy manual, off of an old one. But I've spent a lot of time in my career writing and rewriting policy. What I learned at the district level with the district that I was in was that the Arkansas School Board Association puts out a policy manual every year. You can subscribe to that. Those policies are lawyer tested, and our district goes in every summer and copies and pastes those changes, and with the exception of a handful of addendum local policies, that is our policy manual, is what the state says it is. At first, I thought this was a bad idea because it's too generic. It doesn't apply to our district. But the more experience I got with the policy manual, the more I realized that the verbiage in these manuals is very deliberately processed, changed down to individual letters and numbers. And unless you have a process within your school that needs a particular policy, wandering too far from the policy manual is not generally a good idea. An example of this would be that our Personnel Policy Committee wanted to make broad changes to some of the policies with regards to the fact that we were a 4-day versus 5-day week, and it created a bit of a stir with the board. We eventually came to a meaningful and effective compromise, but as you really get to picking apart those policies, once you change them, you're no longer protected by the ASBA and their legal team. It's kind of like modifying your car while it's under warranty. You're going to lose the warranty. It's kind of the same. If you modify the verbiage that they created for the policy, your legal protection from the ASBA's lawyers goes away. So it's a very precarious and interesting situation in the state of Arkansas with the way policies are handled, but at the same time, it's very reassuring that you have those protections. That was a very good assignment for me to learn how things are done and the process that we go through to make that happen. And finally, standard 7.4 has to do with understanding the implications of larger cultural, social, economic, legal, and political interest changes and expectations, and demonstrating a capacity to evaluate and represent district needs and priorities in the midst of those changes. I don't know that there has been a bigger, more impactful change to the educational system than having to have to go through COVID. Um, right at this paper was written within 2 years of COVID for my organization development class at Southern Arkansas. It was a 10-page paper that I wrote titled Change and Modern Educational Leadership. The assignment was to analyze from a leadership perspective changes to the system that have occurred directly as a result of the COVID pandemic. So I broke my paper down into social change, structural change, pedagogical change, and it culminated with a section of how to lead through these changes. You know, socially, the behaviors went way up within the schools and in communication with parents. People lost their manners. Structurally, we were out of school for a very long time. We went to blended learning in some cases and worked our way back slowly. Pedagogically, bringing kids back into the classroom that were now a full year behind where they should have been, if not more, and still being expected to meet state grade level standards in a school that was already not performing all that well. It's very big problems, very real problems that we quite frankly are still struggling and fighting through. I would say things are moving back toward a normal, but I'm not sure that we as a state or as individual schools are there yet. These kids that went through it the worst, the 4th to 6th graders now that really got hit in the lower grades with reading and mathematics are always seem to be carrying lower scores. We've not managed to catch them all up the way we wish we could have yet. But this paper made me stop and reflect on the damage that was done by COVID, the processes that we've gone through to try to right those wrongs, and being a leader through such a difficult time of change in education. And looking at my overall EDS experience, it almost brings a tear to my eye. I started my EDS, collectively decided with Dr. Cothran to stop and enroll in the brand new doctoral program at SAU. I did a bunch of classes at SAU and was very happy with how they were treating me as far as learning research and academic writing and things like that, but they were not teaching me to be a superintendent. It was very read a book, write a paper, and I wasn't learning anything about my capacity as a district level leader. I made a very difficult choice to leave the program and come back to Henderson, transfer in some credits, and complete this program at Henderson. I'm happy to announce that I will be returning to SAU in the fall or in the spring. I need 4 classes and a dissertation as well as my comprehensive exams, and I will continue on my doctoral journey. They graciously accepted me back, but I do feel much better prepared to be a superintendent because I made the choice to go to Henderson. I absolutely adore the Henderson faculty. The experience that I've had at the university, and now that I have topped out the university's programs, with a slight tear in my eye, I bid you all farewell and thank you from the bottom of my heart for the administrative building level masters and this EDS at the district level. I could not possibly be more thankful for what I have received and the people that I have gotten to know and the opportunities that have been presented to me. My daughter is now a cheerleader at Henderson as a direct result of my experience there. And it really makes me sad to end this, but I guess it's time. And again, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I love you all, and I will always be ready.